Sister Margareta knelt on the cold stone floor of the chapel. Her knees hurt, but she tried not to think about it. The morning bells had rung 1 hour ago. All the other nuns were busy with their morning prayers, but Margareta could not pray today. Through the small window, she could hear men shouting outside. Horses were making noise in the yard. She heard the sound of metal hitting metal. War had come to the walls of their peaceful abbey. An abbey is like a special house where nuns live. Nuns are women who promise to spend their whole lives serving God. They wear special clothes and follow strict rules. Margareta had lived in this abbey for 5 years, ever since she was 15 years old. "Sister, you must come quickly," a voice called out. Margareta jumped. She turned around and saw Mother Superior standing in the doorway. Mother Superior was the leader of all the nuns. Her face was as white as snow, and she looked very worried. "What is wrong, Mother?" Margareta asked. "A knight is dying at our front gate. He is asking for help. The abbess has said we will help him. You must come with me to take care of his wounds." Margareta stood up slowly. Her legs felt shaky. For 5 years, she had lived behind these safe walls. She had not talked to any man except the priest. She had never touched a man except when she prayed for sick people. "Mother, I made promises to God that I would never marry or touch men. How can I help this knight?" "Child, we also promised God that we would help sick people. This knight will die if we do not help him. God would be angry with us if we let him die." They walked down the long hallway together. Their sandals made slapping sounds on the stones. Margareta's heart was beating very fast. She had not seen the world outside these walls for so long. What would she find out there? The abbey gates were wide open. Sunlight came through them like golden fire. In the yard lay a person wearing chainmail armor. Dark red blood was pooled under him like spilled wine. Margareta gasped when she saw him. The knight was young, maybe 20 years old. His dark hair was stuck to his head with sweat and blood. His face was as pale as a white candle, but something about him made her stop breathing. She felt like she knew him somehow. His eyes were green like summer grass, just like her own green eyes when she looked in a mirror. His nose was straight and sharp, just like her nose. His mouth had full lips that curved the same way hers did. "Sister, help me lift him," Mother Superior said firmly. Margareta knelt down next to the knight. Her hands were shaking as she touched his shoulders. Through his armor, she could feel that he was warm and strong and still alive. He opened his eyes. Those green eyes that looked so much like her own. He looked right at her. "Who are you?" he whispered in a weak voice. "Sister Margareta of Glastonbury Abbey." He tried to sit up. Blood was running from a wound in his side. "Your face. I know your face. I have seen it in my dreams." His eyes rolled back in his head. He became unconscious and could not speak anymore. Mother Superior looked worried. "Quickly, child. We must get him to the hospital room. He has lost too much blood." They carried him inside the abbey. He was very heavy in their arms, but Margareta felt something strange. She felt like she was carrying a part of herself. The hospital room smelled like herbs and candle smoke. Margareta cleaned the knight's wounds with gentle hands. Mother Superior had left to pray for his soul. They were alone. His chest moved up and down slowly as he breathed. The wound in his side was deep, but it would not kill him. It looked like an arrow had hit him from close by. Margareta had learned about healing from the abbey's old doctor. Sister Catherine had taught her about bones and blood. She knew about medicines made from plants. She knew about how the human body worked. But Sister Catherine had never taught her why this stranger's face felt like looking in a mirror. The knight moved a little. His eyes opened again. "Water," he said in a scratchy voice. Margareta held a cup to his lips. He drank deeply. Some water ran down his chin. She wiped it away with a soft cloth. "Thank you, sister. You have very gentle hands. It is my job to help people for God." He studied her face carefully. His green eyes were sharp even though he was hurt. "How long have you lived here in this abbey?" 5 years. Since I was 15 years old. "And before that, where did you live?" The question hit her like a punch. Margareta put down the water cup. Her hands started shaking. "I do not remember much. I was found as a child, wandering alone in the forest. The sisters took me in and raised me." The knight's eyes got very wide. He tried to sit up again. "Found? Where? What forest?" "Sir Knight, you must rest. Your wounds need time to heal." "What forest?" His voice sounded urgent now, almost desperate. "The Forest of Dean, near the border with Wales." "But why do you ask me these things?" The knight fell back against his pillow. His face had become even more pale. "My God," he whispered, "it cannot be true." "What cannot be true?" "My name is Sir Edmund of Ravenscroft. 20 years ago my parents were travelling through the Forest of Dean. Bad men attacked them and killed them. My twin sister was taken away." The world started spinning around Margareta. The stone walls seemed to bend and move. "That cannot be possible." She was 5 years old when it happened. She had green eyes like mine, dark hair like mine. They never found her body. I always believed she was still alive somewhere. I always hoped I would find her. Margareta backed away from the bed. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like it might burst. "No, you are wrong. I am a bride of Christ. This abbey is my only family. Look at me, sister. Look at my face carefully. Tell me you do not see anything familiar." She looked at him, and suddenly she saw everything clearly. The shape of his jaw was exactly like hers. His left eyebrow curved higher than his right eyebrow, just like hers. He had a small scar on his chin in the exact same place where she had a scar. She touched her own chin. The same scar. She remembered falling as a little child and getting hurt. It was a memory she had buried deep in her mind. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Is it crazy, or did God bring me here on purpose? Did God want us to find each other?" Margareta ran away from the hospital room. She ran through the hallways like a scared animal. Behind her, she heard Edmund calling her name. But that was not her real name, was it? Deep in her memory, another name was trying to come back. A name she had not heard in 15 years. Emma. Mother Superior found Margareta in the chapel. She was kneeling in front of the altar, crying, "Child, what is troubling you so much?" "Mother, the knight says he thinks I am his sister, his twin sister, who was lost years ago in the forest." Mother Superior sat down beside her on the cold stone floor, her old hands folded together in prayer. "And what do you believe in your heart?" "I do not know what to believe. When I look at him, I see myself. When he talks, something inside me remembers things. But I made sacred promises to God. Mother, I am supposed to stay here forever. Tell me, child, in your heart, do you really believe his words are true?" Margareta closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, old memories started coming back. She remembered a woman's voice singing lullabies, a man's laughter, a boy with green eyes playing in a garden. Edmund. His name really was Edmund, and her name had been Emma. "Yes," she whispered. "God help me, I believe it is true." Mother Superior nodded slowly. then you have a choice that no nun should ever have to make. Your promises bind you to this place, but this night is your blood family. What should I do? Only you can decide, child. But remember this, the church teaches that family bonds are sacred. Blood calls to blood. If God brought your brother to this place, maybe he has a plan. That night, Margareta could not sleep. She walked through the hallways like a ghost. Her feet took her back to the hospital room. Edmund was awake. Moonlight was shining through the window across his face. "I knew you would come back," he said softly. "I should not be here. It is against the rules for me to talk with men when we are alone. Even with your own brother." The word hung in the air between them. Brother. It felt right when she heard it, like a word she was born to say. "Tell me about our family," she said quietly. Edmund's face lit up with happiness. Even though he was hurt, he smiled. "Our father was Lord William of Ravenscroft. He was a good man who was fair to everyone. He treated his workers well. Our mother was Lady Catherine. She had the most beautiful singing voice in the world. She used to sing us to sleep every night." Margareta gasped. "The lullaby. About the silver moon and the golden stars. You remember it? I thought it was just a dream. For years I dreamed about someone singing that song. She sang it every night to both of us. You would curl up next to me in our big bed. You always took all the blankets." Tears ran down Margareta's cheeks. The memories came flooding back like water through a broken dam. "And you always complained, but you never took the blankets back from me. I was your big brother. By 7 minutes, I had to protect you. What happened to us that day in the forest?" Edmund's face became dark and sad. "Bad men who steal things for money. They killed our parents to take their gold. You tried to run away. I tried to follow you, but there were too many of them. They hit me on the head, and I became unconscious. When I woke up, you were gone. I ran deep into the forest. I hid inside a hollow tree for 3 days. I was so scared and so hungry. Then the sisters found me and brought me here. I looked for you for years and years. I searched every forest and every village. I never stopped trying to find you." Margareta knelt beside his bed. She took his hand in both of hers. It was warm and strong and familiar. "Edmund, my brother. Emma, my sister." They held hands in the moonlight. Two souls who had found each other again after 15 years apart. But even though joy filled her heart, Margareta felt the weight of her promises to God. She was supposed to stay in this place forever. She was supposed to serve God through prayer. How could she choose between her brother and her sacred calling? 3 days passed. Edmund grew stronger each day. His wounds healed under Margareta's careful care. But his presence in the abbey caused the other nuns to whisper and talk. Some sisters believed his story. Others thought it was a trick to steal one of their sisters away from God's service. Mother Superior called Margareta to her private room. "The abbess has made a decision," she said. "Sir Edmund must leave tomorrow morning. But, Mother, he is still weak. His wounds are not completely healed. His wounds are healed enough for him to travel. Child, his presence here is disrupting our holy order. The sisters talk about nothing but his claims about whether you are really his sister. And what do you believe?" Mother Superior looked out the window. In the courtyard below, Edmund was practicing with his sword. His movements were smooth, despite his bandages. "I believe God works in mysterious ways. But I also believe that some tests are too hard for people to handle." That evening, Margareta went to see Edmund one last time. He was packing his few belongings. "They are making you leave." "I know," the abbess told me herself. She is afraid I will corrupt you, that I will turn you away from your holy path. Will you try to do that? Edmund stopped packing. He looked at her with those familiar green eyes. Emma, I will not lie to you. I want you to come with me. You are my only family. You are all I have left in this world. But I will not force you to break your promises to God. Where will you go? Back to Ravenscroft. To our family lands. I am the rightful lord now. I have duties there. There are people who depend on me, and I have duties here. They stood in silence, brother and sister, family calling to family. But duty and faith stand between them like a wall. There is another way, Edmund said quietly. What way? Come with me for just a short time. See our family home. Meet the people who knew our parents. Then you can decide what to do. If you choose to come back to the Abbey, I will bring you back here myself. Margaretta's heart raced. Leave the Abbey, even for a short time? It seemed impossible. I cannot. My promises to God are not prison chains, Emma. Even nuns can travel sometimes, for holy work, for family duties. The abbess would never allow it. Then do not ask her permission. The words hung in the air like something you could touch. Leave without permission. Break her promises of obedience. You are asking me to sin. I am asking you to live, to see the world beyond these walls, to know who you truly are. Margareta closed her eyes. In her mind, she heard her mother's lullaby. She saw her father's kind face. She felt the warmth of family love she had lost so long ago. If I come with you, it would only be for a few days. 1 week. No more. I swear it on our parents' souls. And then you will bring me back here? If that is what you choose, yes. Margareta opened her eyes. She looked at her brother's face. So much like her own, so full of hope. Then, God forgive me, I will come with you. They left before the sun came up, while the sisters were still sleeping and saying their morning prayers. Margareta wore a simple brown dress that Edmund had bought in the village. Her nun's clothes lay folded on her bed, with a letter explaining where she had gone. She had written, Mother Superior, I go to see my family's lands. I need to understand who I was before God called me to serve him. I will come back within 1 week. Please forgive me for leaving without permission. I am still your daughter in Christ. Edmund helped her climb onto his horse. It was a big black horse named Thunder. She sat behind Edmund with her arms around his waist. She had forgotten about proper distance in the excitement of their escape. Are you afraid? Edmund asked, as they rode through the forest. Very afraid, she admitted. I have not been outside the Abbey walls in 5 years. The world seems so big and so dangerous. I will protect you, I promise. They rode north through the morning. The forest gave way to rolling hills covered with grass. Then they came to farmland with small villages scattered around. Margareta stared at everything with wide eyes. Children played in dusty streets. Women hung wet laundry up to dry. Men worked in fields of wheat and barley. This was a normal life, the life she might have lived if bad men had not destroyed her family. Tell me about Ravenscroft, she said. It sits on a hill overlooking a river. The castle is old but strong. Our great-grandfather built it to guard the valley. There are 40 families in the village. They are good people. They have waited 20 years for their lord to come home. Do they know about me? They know that Lord William had twin children. They know that one was lost. They will welcome you with great joy. They stopped at noon to rest the horse and eat bread and cheese. Margareta sat on a fallen log, watching Edmund take care of Thunder. You love that horse, she said. Thunder has saved my life many times, in France and in the Holy Land. You were a crusader? You went to fight in Jerusalem? For 3 years, fighting to free the holy city from enemies. His face became dark and sad. I saw terrible things there, Emma. Men do evil things in God's name. It made me question many things. And now what do you believe? Now I think God cares more about how we treat each other than about which prayers we say or which land we call holy. That afternoon they reached the valley of Ravenscroft. Margareta gasped when she saw her first sight of home. The castle stood proudly on its hill. Grey stone walls gleamed in the sunlight. Colourful flags flew from the towers. Green fields stretched as far as she could see. And something deep in her memory stirred to life. She remembered being a little girl running through those fields, laughing, happy, safe. I remember this place, she whispered. What do you remember? Running through the tall grass. You chased me. We played some kind of game, knights and dragons. You always wanted to be the knight. I had to be the dragon. And I always won. You always cheated. They laughed together. The sound echoed across the valley like beautiful music. But as they rode toward the castle, Margareta felt something else growing inside her, a worried feeling. She had broken her promises to be here. She had left the abbey without permission. What would happen when she went back? Would Mother Superior forgive her? Would God forgive her? The people of Ravenscroft village lined the road as they rode past. They cheered and clapped to see their lord return home. Old women cried tears of joy. Children threw flower petals at them. But Margareta also heard whispers. Is that her, the lost daughter? She looks like Lady Catherine. God rest her soul. But she wears common clothes. Is she really of noble blood? At the castle gates, an old man was waiting. He had white hair and was bent over with age, but his eyes were as sharp as a hawk's. Sir Gareth, Edmund called out, my old teacher. You are still alive, you ancient warrior. Hard to kill, my lord. Like weeds and people who collect taxes. The old knight's eyes looked carefully at Margareta. And this is Lady Emma, though she goes by another name now. Sister Margareta, she said softly, a holy sister. Your parents would be proud and surprised. You were quite the little troublemaker as a child. He led them into the castle courtyard. Servants hurried around to take care of their horse and bring food and wine. But Margareta barely noticed any of this. Everything looked familiar. The stone steps, the great hall with its huge fireplace, the wall hangings that showed hunting scenes. Home. This really was home. Your room has been kept ready for you, Sir Gareth said. For 20 years we have waited for this day. He led Margareta up a winding stairway to a tower room. When he opened the door, she cried out in amazement. It was exactly as she had left it 20 years ago. A child's room. Dolls sat on shelves. A rocking horse stood by the window. A small bed with pink covers. We changed nothing, Sir Gareth said gently. Lord William ordered it to stay this way, in case you ever came home. Margareta walked slowly around the room. She touched each toy and each piece of furniture. Memories came flooding back with every step. She remembered playing with her dolls, riding the wooden horse, hiding under the bed when she was in trouble. On a small table sat a book called Stories of Saints and Heroes. She opened it carefully. On the first page, written in a child's shaky handwriting, Emma of Ravenscroft. Her own writing from before she knew how to write very well. You always loved that book, Sir Gareth said. Maybe it planted the seed of your holy calling. That evening they had a big feast in the great hall. The whole village came to welcome their lord home. Margareta sat at the high table wearing a borrowed dress of green silk. She felt like she was acting in some kind of play. Lady Emma of Ravenscroft. But was that who she really was? The feast went late into the night. There was music and dancing, stories and laughter. Margareta had never seen such joy. In the abbey, even celebrations were serious and quiet. Edmund stood up to talk to the crowd. My friends, my people, 20 years ago, darkness fell on this valley. Bad men murdered my parents and scattered our family. But today, God's light shines on us again. My sister has returned. Our family is complete. The crowd cheered loudly, but Margareta felt a chill run down her back. Complete? Was their family really complete? She was still a nun, still bound by sacred promises. This joy could only last 1 week. On the 4th day of her visit, trouble came to Ravenscroft. Margareta was in the village, visiting sick children and bringing them medicine. When the alarm started, horns blew from the castle walls. Church bells rang in warning. "What is happening?" she asked Mary, her helper. "Armed men are coming, my lady. Riders with weapons." They hurried back to the castle. In the courtyard, Edmund was putting on his sword belt. His face looked very serious. "What is wrong?" Margareta asked. "Sir Roderick of Blackmoor is coming with 50 soldiers. He says he owns these lands now." "Says he owns them? But you are the rightful heir. He claims that 20 years of absence means I give up my rights, that Ravenscroft is abandoned property that he can take." Sir Gareth spit on the ground. "Vulture, he has waited all these years for a chance to steal what is not his. Will there be a battle?" Margareta asked, feeling scared. "If we have to fight, we will," Edmund replied. "But first, we will talk. We will try to solve this peacefully." An hour later, Sir Roderick arrived. He was a big man with cold eyes and a mean-looking mouth. His soldiers looked rough and dangerous. The two groups faced each other in the courtyard. The tension was thick, like the air before a thunderstorm. "Edmund of Ravenscroft," Sir Roderick called out, "if that is really who you are. I am Lord Edmund, rightful heir to these lands. I am the son of Lord William, who was murdered by bandits. Murdered 20 years ago. His son disappeared and was thought to be dead. These lands have no master. I claim them by right of conquest." "The only thing you will conquer here is a grave," Edmund replied coldly. Margareta stepped forward. She did not know why her feet moved without her thinking about it. "Sir Roderick," she said, "I am Lady Emma of Ravenscroft, Lord Edmund's twin sister. These are our family lands and our people. You have no claim here." Sir Roderick's eyes got wide with surprise. Then they became narrow and suspicious. "Lady Emma died with her parents. Everyone knows this." "Then you are looking at a ghost," she said, with more courage than she felt. "Prove it. Prove you are who you say you are." Margareta felt trapped. How could she prove 20-year-old memories? What proof could she give? Then she remembered something. "Sir Gareth," she called, "please bring the book from my room. The saint's stories." The old knight hurried away and came back with the child's book she had found. "This was mine when I was a child," she said, opening it. "See the writing, Emma of Ravenscroft, written in my own hand." Sir Roderick looked at the book carefully. His frown got deeper. "Anyone could have written this. Anyone could have put it there to support your lies. Then ask me about the castle, about the village, about things that only the Lord's daughter would know." For an hour Sir Roderick asked her questions, about secret passages in the castle, about the servants' names, about family traditions and customs. Margareta answered every question correctly. Her memory served her well. The castle gave up its secrets like an old friend, welcoming her home. Finally, Sir Roderick had no more questions. His face was dark with angry frustration. "Even if you are Lady Emma," he said in a nasty voice, "you are a nun. You cannot inherit lands. These lands still have no rightful lord. My brother lives. He inherits everything. Your brother was gone for 20 years. The law says a missing heir can reclaim his lands if he returns alive." Sir Gareth interrupted. "I studied law before I learned to use a sword." Sir Roderick's hand moved to his sword. His men became tense behind him, ready to fight. "Then we will settle this with steel and blood." "If you want to fight, we will fight," Edmund replied. "But know this, these people are under my protection. Any harm to them will be answered 10 times over." For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Sir Roderick stepped back. "I will return," he promised, "with the king's authority. We shall see who has the stronger claim then." His men mounted their horses and rode away. But their threat hung over the castle like a bad smell. That evening, as Margareta walked alone in the castle garden, she realized something important. These people needed her, not just as Edmund's sister but as their lady and protector. How could she abandon them to return to her quiet life of prayer? But how could she abandon her promises to God? The next morning brought a messenger from the abbey. He carried a letter from Mother Superior. Margareta's hands shook as she read it. "Sister Margareta, your absence causes great scandal. Return immediately or face being thrown out of the church forever. The abbess's patience is at an end." Being thrown out of the church meant she could never take communion or receive the sacraments. It meant being cut off from God's grace forever. But as she read the harsh words, Margareta felt something unexpected: relief. The decision was being made for her. If she stayed at Ravenscroft, she would lose her place in the church. If she returned to the abbey, she would lose her place in the world and abandon her people. But maybe, she thought, there were more ways to serve God than through the official church. "Bad news?" Edmund asked, seeing her expression. "The abbess demands that I return immediately, or I will be thrown out of the church forever. And what do you choose?" Margareta looked around the great hall, at the servants preparing defences in case Sir Roderick returned, at Sir Gareth sharpening weapons, at village children playing in the courtyard, despite the danger, all of them depending on her and Edmund to protect them. "I choose my people," she said quietly. "I choose my family. I choose to serve God here, in the world, rather than hidden away from it." Edmund's face lit up with pure joy. He swept her up in his arms and spun her around. "Emma, my sister, you are truly home at last." But even as she laughed, Margareta felt sadness too. She would miss the abbey. She would miss the sisters who had raised her. She would miss the certainty of her former life. Growing up, she realized, meant choosing which losses you could live with. 3 days later, Sir Roderick returned. This time he brought a royal herald and 200 soldiers wearing the king's colours. The herald read from an official scroll, "By order of His Majesty King Henry, these lands are placed under royal protection while we investigate the competing claims. All parties will present their evidence before the King's Justice." The King's Justice was Sir William the Fair, an old knight known for his wisdom. He listened to both sides carefully. After 2 days of investigation, Sir William made his decision. "This is a complex matter," he said. "Both claims have some merit. There is only one way to settle this: trial by combat. Let God decide who speaks the truth." In medieval times, when the evidence was unclear, knights would fight to determine who was right. People believed that God would help the righteous person win. But Edmund had no champion to fight for him, except old Sir Gareth, who was 70 years old. Sir Roderick's champion was Sir Marcus the Black, a famous fighter who had never lost a duel. Just when it seemed hopeless, a stranger arrived at the castle. He was tall and lean, with kind blue eyes. He wore plain clothes, but carried himself like a true knight. "I am Sir Thomas of Ashford," he said. "I seek employment as a sword for hire." "What brings you to our hall?" Edmund asked. The knight's eyes found Margaretta's. "I heard there was a holy sister here who broke her vows to serve her family. Such courage deserves protection. You would fight for us. For what payment?" "For the honor of serving a righteous cause." His eyes stayed on Margaretta, and perhaps for the chance to know the woman brave enough to choose love over law. The next morning, the two champions fought in the castle courtyard. Sir Thomas was smaller than Sir Marcus, but he was faster and smarter. After a fierce battle, he defeated the evil knight and won the day. Sir Roderick was forced to admit defeat and leave Ravenscroft forever. That evening, as Margareta walked in the garden, Sir Thomas found her among the roses. "You saved us all today," she said gratefully. "I did what was right, what honor demanded." As they talked, Margareta felt something she had never experienced before. Her heart beat faster when she looked at him. She felt warm and happy in his presence. She had been a nun for 5 years. She had promised to never love a man. But looking into Sir Thomas's kind blue eyes, she wondered if some promises were meant to be broken, if some loves were worth the risk. "Lady Emma," he said softly, "would you allow me to court you, to try to win your heart?" Margareta thought about all she had given up, her place in the church, her safe life behind abbey walls, her promises of celibacy. But she also thought about all she had gained. Her brother, her people, her true identity, and now, perhaps, true love. "Yes," she whispered, "I would like that very much." 6 months later, the chapel of Ravenscroft Castle was filled with flowers and joy. Lady Emma of Ravenscroft walked down the aisle in a beautiful white dress, carrying roses from her own garden. At the altar waited for Sir Thomas, soon to be Lord Thomas of Ravenscroft, her husband, her love, her choice. The ceremony was performed by Father Marcus, the village priest. He had received special permission to marry a former nun. "Love," the old priest said, "is God's greatest gift to humanity. It takes many forms. Love of family, love of God, love of neighbor, and yes, love between husband and wife." He looked directly at Emma as he spoke. "Some people believe that to love God, we must give up all earthly love. But I believe that God is love, and wherever love exists, God exists too." Edmund stood as witness, his face shining with pride. Sir Gareth wept tears of joy. The whole village had come to celebrate their lady's wedding day. When the priest asked Emma if she would take Thomas as her husband, she looked into his blue eyes and saw her future there. She saw children playing in the garden. She saw years of shared happiness and sorrow. She saw a love that would last forever. "I do," she said with all her heart. When they kissed, the crowd cheered and threw flower petals like snow. Emma laughed with pure joy. She had made her choice. She had chosen love over law, family over loneliness, life over the safety of walls. It had cost her the church's official blessing, but it had gained her something far more precious, a home, a family, and a love that blessed itself. 5 years later, Lady Emma stood in her healing garden, watching her young daughter chase butterflies among the herbs. Little Catherine had her father's blue eyes and her mother's determined spirit. Emma's healing practice had grown famous throughout the region. People came from far and wide, seeking her help. She had become more renowned as a healer than she ever was as a nun. One day, a young nun arrived at the castle seeking sanctuary. She had fallen in love and broken her vows, just as Emma had done years before. "There is no shame in love," Emma told the frightened girl. "Only in denying love when it is real and good." That evening, Emma sat with Thomas on their chamber balcony. The stars wheeled overhead like diamonds on black cloth. "Any regrets?" Thomas asked, as he often did. Emma took his hand and felt the familiar warmth and strength there. "None," she said firmly. "This life we have built, this love we share, this family we have created, it is everything I ever dreamed of and more." She stood and looked out over their lands. Below them, their people slept safely in their beds. Their children played in green meadows. Their futures stretched bright and promising to the horizon. "I serve God here as truly as I ever did in the Abbey," she said, "perhaps more truly. Here I heal bodies as well as souls. Here I love as well as pray. Here I live as God meant people to live, fully, completely, without hiding their light." Thomas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. She leaned back against his chest and felt his heartbeat, strong and steady and eternal. "My remarkable wife," he whispered, "my beloved Emma, you have made me the happiest man in all of England. And you have shown me that love is not the enemy of faith." She replied, "It is faith's greatest expression." They stood together watching the moon rise over their valley. Their home, their kingdom of love. Emma had broken every vow she had once held sacred. She had disobeyed every rule she had been taught, but in doing so, she had found her true calling. Not as a bride of Christ hidden behind walls, but as a woman of God, living fully in his world, healing, loving, serving, complete at last. Sometimes, she had learned, the greatest act of faith is choosing love over fear. Sometimes, the holiest thing you can do is follow your heart home. And in that castle on the hill, surrounded by love and laughter and the sound of children playing, Emma knew she had made the right choice. She was exactly where God wanted her to be. The end. The water in the Thames River was freezing cold on that winter day. Eliza Thornfield stood on Blackfriars Bridge, watching people walk back and forth. She was 19 years old and worked as a maid at a big house called Ashworth Manor. Suddenly she heard screaming. A man had fallen off the bridge into the icy water below. Without thinking twice, Eliza jumped in after him. The cold water hit her like 1,000 needles. She could barely breathe, but she swam down toward the man who was sinking fast. It was Lord William Ashworth, the son of the Duke who owned the manor where she worked. His heavy winter coat was pulling him down like a heavy rock. His eyes were closed, and bubbles came out of his mouth. He was drowning. Eliza kicked her legs as hard as she could. Her chest burned because she needed air so badly. She wrapped her arms around William's chest and pushed toward the light above them. They both came up to the surface at the same time. William coughed up dirty river water and started breathing again. Eliza opened her mouth to call for help, but nothing came out. She tried again to yell. Still nothing. The freezing cold water had hurt her throat so badly that she couldn't make any sound at all. She had saved Lord William's life, but she had lost her voice forever. The 3 months before that terrible day in the river, Eliza had the most beautiful singing voice in all of England. She worked in the big kitchen at Ashworth Manor with the other servants. Every evening after dinner, she would sing songs that made everyone stop what they were doing to listen. Her voice was so lovely that it could make grown men cry happy tears. Even Lord William, who was the son of the Duke and would inherit everything someday, would stop walking in the hallway just to hear her sing. William was 24 years old, which made him 5 years older than Eliza. He was going to be a duke someday, which meant he was very important and rich. Eliza was just the daughter of a housemaid, which meant she wasn't important at all according to the rules of society. But when Eliza sang her beautiful songs, none of that seemed to matter. "Your voice sounds like angels singing in heaven," William told her one evening. He was standing in the doorway of the servants' hall, still wearing his riding clothes because he had just come back from riding his horse. "Promise me you'll never stop singing, Eliza." Eliza curtsied politely like servants were supposed to do. "I promise, my lord," she said with a smile. She kept that promise for exactly 87 more days. Then came the day when she jumped into the freezing river and everything changed forever. Now, Eliza was lying in one of the guest bedrooms at the manor. The family doctor had looked at her throat 3 different times. He shook his head sadly each time and told everyone that the damage couldn't be fixed. The freezing water had hurt her vocal cords so badly that she would never be able to speak or sing again. Lord William came to sit by her bed every single day. He brought her hot tea and tried to tell funny stories to make her smile. But Eliza could see the sadness and guilt in his eyes. She had saved his life, but she had lost the thing she loved most in the world. "I'm so very sorry," he whispered on the 7th day after the accident. "This is all my fault. If I hadn't fallen into the river, you wouldn't have had to save me." Eliza wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault at all. She wanted to say that she would jump into that freezing river again without even thinking about it if it meant saving his life. But all she could do was shake her head and point to her heart. Some things, she realized, were much more important than being able to talk. 2 weeks after the accident, something awful happened. Mrs. Hartwell, who was in charge of all the servants at the manor, came into the kitchen at breakfast time. She was holding a newspaper from London and looked very serious. "Lord William is going to get married," she announced to everyone. "It says right here in the paper that he's engaged to Lady Catherine Pemberton. They're going to have their wedding in the spring." Eliza was drinking tea when she heard this news. Her hands started shaking so badly that her teacup fell right out of her fingers and smashed into 1,000,000 pieces on the floor. She hadn't meant to drop it. Her hands had just stopped working when she heard that William was going to marry someone else. All the other servants rushed over to clean up the broken pieces, but Eliza couldn't move at all. William was getting married to someone who wasn't her. Of course he was, she thought sadly. How could she have been so silly to think that their quiet talks together meant anything special? He was going to be a duke. She was nobody important. That afternoon, William found her in the library where she was dusting books and trying to look busy. He closed the door behind him so no one could hear them talking. "Eliza," he said softly, "I need to explain what happened." She kept dusting the books because she couldn't bear to look at him. "My father arranged this marriage before the accident even happened," William continued. "The legal papers are already signed. I don't have any choice in the matter." Eliza finally turned around and looked him straight in the eyes. She could see the truth there. He was just as trapped by the rules of society as she was, maybe even more trapped. She walked over to the writing desk and picked up a piece of paper and a pen. In her best handwriting, she wrote, "I understand." William read what she had written and crumpled up the paper in his fist. "No," he said firmly. "You don't understand at all. I don't want to marry Lady Catherine. I want—" He stopped talking because he couldn't say what he really meant. They both knew he couldn't say it out loud. Eliza picked up her pen again and wrote, "What do you want?" William stared at her words for a very long time. Then he sat down heavily in the big leather chair and put his head in his hands. "I want to hear your voice again," he whispered. "I want to hear you sing those beautiful songs. I want to tell you things I can never tell anyone else. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're here in this house, I want. He looked up at her with eyes full of sadness. I want something I can never have. The wedding preparations started right away. Lady Catherine Pemberton came to Ashworth Manor with 12 huge trunks full of clothes and a bunch of her own servants. She was beautiful in the way that rich ladies were supposed to be, very pale skin, delicate features, and perfect manners. But she was also completely uninterested in her future husband. Eliza had to watch from the servants' staircase as Lady Catherine ignored William's attempts to talk with her. She yawned when he told stories about managing the estate. She complained about the food, the weather, and what she called the awful smell of the countryside. At least this marriage will be good for both our families, Lady Catherine told her personal maid one evening. Eliza was cleaning the fireplace in the next room and could hear every word. Lord William seems nice enough, I suppose, though he's terribly boring. I think I can put up with him for the sake of becoming a duchess someday. Eliza's hands clenched tightly around the fireplace poker she was holding. This horrible woman didn't deserve William. She didn't even want him. But what could a servant girl who couldn't speak do about any of it? The answer came 3 days later. Eliza was taking a walk in the rose garden when she heard someone crying. She followed the sound to the pretty gazebo in the middle of the garden, where she found William sitting with his head in his hands. I can't do it, he said, when he saw her walking toward him. I can't marry her, Eliza. She thinks I'm just some kind of business deal. She has no interest in love, or having a real family, or anything that actually matters. Eliza sat down beside him on the wooden bench. She wanted so badly to comfort him, but how could she do that without being able to talk? She thought for a moment, then stood up and walked over to the garden path. She picked up a small stick and knelt down in the dirt. Very carefully, she wrote 2 words. Then don't. William let out a bitter laugh. It's not that simple, Eliza. My father will disown me completely. Our whole family will be ruined financially. Eliza knelt down again and wrote more words in the dirt. Some things are worth the risk. Like what? William asked sadly. Eliza looked at him for a long moment. Her heart was beating very fast. Then she wrote just 1 word in the dirt. Love. That night, William made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. He couldn't speak to Eliza with regular words, and she couldn't speak to him at all anymore. But there had to be another way for them to talk to each other. There had to be some kind of language they could both learn to share. William remembered reading something in a book about hand signs that deaf people used to communicate with each other in London. If he could learn this special language, maybe he could have real conversations with Eliza. Maybe he could tell her all the things he couldn't say out loud. William spent that entire night in the library, looking through every book he could find about sign language and hand gestures. By the time the sun came up, he had found 3 books that might help, and a letter that could introduce him to a special school in London. He left for the city that very morning, telling his father that he had some important business to take care of. Lady Catherine barely looked up from her embroidery when he said goodbye. At the London School for the Deaf, William met Mr. Samuel Cooper, a teacher who had been born without the ability to hear. Mr. Cooper was very patient and kind, and he seemed excited to have such an eager student. Most people learn sign language because they have to, Mr. Cooper explained, by writing notes and using gestures. You are learning because you want to. That makes all the difference in the world. William threw himself into studying this new language. He learned simple words first. Hello, goodbye, thank you, and please. Then he moved on to more complicated ideas: beautiful friend, important, and care. After 2 weeks of very hard studying, he learned the hand sign for love. He practiced making that gesture over and over and over until his hands could form it perfectly without him even having to think about it. Meanwhile, back at Ashworth Manor, Eliza was more miserable than she had ever been in her life. William had left without explaining where he was going or why. Lady Catherine was getting more and more excited about planning their wedding, and Eliza felt more voiceless than ever before. Mrs. Hartwell found her crying in the laundry room one afternoon. "Child, what's wrong with you?" the kind housekeeper asked. "And don't you dare write nothing on a piece of paper. I've known you since the day you were born." Eliza wiped her tears and found her writing materials. Very slowly she wrote, "I love someone I can never have." Mrs. Hartwell read the note and let out a long sigh. "Lord William." Eliza nodded sadly. "Oh, dear child," Mrs. Hartwell said. "I was afraid this might happen." She sat down beside Eliza on the wooden bench in the laundry room. "You know it's impossible, don't you? Even if he weren't already engaged to marry someone else, even if you could still speak, the difference between your social classes." Eliza wrote, "I know it's impossible, but I can't help how I feel." Mrs. Hartwell patted her hand gently. "Love doesn't follow society's rules, child. It never has. But sometimes those rules win anyway." William came back to Ashworth Manor on a Thursday evening in March. The wedding was supposed to happen on May 15th. Only 2 months away. Lady Catherine had already ordered her wedding dress to be made by the finest dressmakers in Paris. But William had a completely different plan in mind. He found Eliza in the kitchen garden, picking fresh herbs for the evening meal. She looked up when she heard his footsteps on the gravel path, and her whole face lit up with joy. Then she remembered that she was just a servant, and looked down at the ground again. William walked closer to her. When he was about 3 feet away, he stopped and slowly raised his hands up in the air. His fingers began to move very carefully and deliberately. He was nervous because he had been practicing this exact moment for weeks and weeks. "Hello," he signed with his hands. Eliza's eyes became as wide as saucers. She stared at his moving hands, then at his face, then back at his hands again. William continued signing, moving his hands more confidently now. "I have learned how to talk with you." Eliza covered her mouth with both hands as tears started streaming down her cheeks. William's signing became even more confident. "I went to London. I learned this special language for..." Eliza looked around frantically, then ran to the garden shed. She came back with a piece of charcoal and a small wooden board. With shaking hands, she wrote, "How? Why?" William read her words and signed his response, "Because I need to tell you something very important." He paused for a moment, gathering all his courage. Then his hands moved to make the most important gesture he had ever learned. "I love you." Eliza dropped the piece of charcoal. She stared at him in complete shock, wonder, and disbelief. William continued signing, "I love you. I have always loved you. Before the accident happened. After the accident happened. Always and forever." Eliza picked up the charcoal with hands that were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She wrote, "But what about Lady Catherine?" William shook his head firmly and signed, "I cannot marry her. I will not marry her. I would rather lose everything I have than live my whole life without." Eliza wrote, "Your father will disown you completely." "I do not care about that," William signed. "Some things are much more important than money or title. Eliza wrote, I cannot speak anymore. I will never be able to sing again. William smiled the most beautiful smile she had ever seen and signed, You do not need a voice to be beautiful. Your hands can speak now. Your eyes can sing better than any voice. He moved closer to her and signed, Will you learn this language with me? Will you let me love you for the rest of our... Eliza looked at him for what felt like the longest moment in history. Then she raised her own hands and tried very carefully to copy the signs she had seen him make. Her movements were clumsy and awkward at first, but slowly, very carefully, she signed back, yes. William's father, the Duke of Ashworth, was not the kind of man who liked it when people disobeyed him. When William announced that he was going to break his engagement with Lady Catherine, the Duke became so angry that his shouting shook the windows of the entire manor. Absolutely not. The Duke roared like an angry lion. The legal contracts are already signed. The announcements have been published in all the newspapers. You will marry Lady Catherine Pemberton or you will no longer be my son. Then I will no longer be your son, William replied very calmly. The Duke stared at him in complete shock. Have you completely lost your mind, boy? What could possibly be worth this foolishness? Some silly romantic notion you read in a book. Love, father, William said simply. I'm doing this for love. Love? The Duke laughed in the most bitter way imaginable. Love doesn't pay the family's debts, boy. Love doesn't restore our family's honor. Love doesn't secure the future of this estate when I'm gone. William stood his ground and didn't back down. What good is having a beautiful estate if there's no love to fill it with happiness? Don't quote poetry at me, the Duke snapped angrily. Tell me the real reason for this madness. Is there another woman, some London actress, who has cast a spell on you? William hesitated for just a moment. He couldn't tell his father about Eliza yet, not until he was ready. The Duke would have her dismissed immediately and probably arrested for corrupting his son. There is someone, William admitted carefully. Someone I care about very deeply. Then bring her here this instant, the Duke demanded. Let me meet this perfect woman who is worth destroying our family's entire future. I cannot do that, William said. Not yet. Cannot or will not. She needs some time to prepare herself for meeting you. The Duke's eyes became very narrow and suspicious. What aren't you telling me, William? Before William could answer that question, Lady Catherine swept into the room like a storm cloud. She had obviously been listening at the door the entire time. Perhaps I can solve this little mystery, she said in the coldest voice imaginable. I've been making some very interesting inquiries about Lord William's behavior since he returned from his mysterious trip to London. William felt his blood turn to ice in his veins. Lady Catherine smiled like a cat who had just caught a mouse. Tell me, Your Grace, did you know that your son has been spending his afternoons down in the servants' quarters, learning some kind of strange finger language from a mute housemaid? The Duke's face turned purple with rage. What did you say? Oh yes, Lady Catherine continued with obvious pleasure at causing trouble. Eliza Thornfield, I believe her name is. The girl who supposedly saved Lord William from drowning and lost her voice in the process. How very convenient that little accident turned out to be. William stepped forward with his hands clenched into fists. You will not speak about her in that way. Ah, Lady Catherine clapped her hands together with glee. So it's true, the future Duke of Ashworth is in love with a servant. A mute servant, no less. How absolutely scandalous. The Duke looked like he might collapse right there on the spot. "William, please tell me this is not true." William lifted his chin proudly and looked his father straight in the eye. "I love Eliza Thornfield with all my heart, and I intend to marry her." The silence that followed was so complete you could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Finally, the Duke spoke in a voice that sounded like winter ice. "You will pack your belongings and leave this house tonight. You are no longer my heir. You are no longer my son. You are nothing to this family." William looked at his father without flinching. So be it. That night, William packed just one small trunk with his most important belongings. He had some money of his own that his mother had left him. Not very much, but enough to survive for a while. He would find some kind of work somewhere. He would build a completely new life for himself. But first, he had to find Eliza and explain everything to her. She was in the servants' hall with some of the younger maids, teaching them simple sign language words. She had been learning very quickly over the past few weeks, picking up new signs every single day. When she saw William walk in, she immediately signed, "What is wrong?" William sat down beside her and signed the entire story with his hands. He told her about his father's angry reaction, Lady Catherine's cruel threats, and how he had been completely disowned by his family. When he finished explaining everything, Eliza was crying so hard she could barely see. She signed back, "This is all my fault." "No," William signed firmly. "This is my choice, and I would make it again." Eliza picked up her writing slate and wrote, "Where will you go now?" "I do not know yet," William signed honestly. "But I want you to come with me wherever I go." Eliza stared at him in amazement. She wrote quickly, "I cannot do that. It would ruin you completely and forever." William took her hands gently in his and signed, "I am already ruined, according to my father. The only thing that matters to me now is being with." But Eliza was already shaking her head sadly. She wrote as fast as she could, "If I disappear with you tonight, everyone will know exactly why you left. They will hunt us down like criminals. They will either force you to come back or destroy you trying to find us." William read her words and felt his heart breaking into a million pieces. She was absolutely right, of course. She was always right about these things. Eliza continued writing, "But if I stay here and pretend nothing ever happened between us, maybe your father will forgive you eventually. Maybe there will be a chance for you to come back home someday. I do not want to come back home without you," William signed with tears in his eyes. Eliza touched his face very gently and wrote, "Then learn everything you can. Become someone new and important. Find a way for us to be together that doesn't destroy everything you are and everything you could become. How long will that take?" William signed. Eliza thought for a long moment, then wrote, "However long it takes, I will wait for you." They held each other that night in the moonlit garden, surrounded by the sweet smell of roses and lavender. They signed their feelings to each other when regular words weren't enough. They memorized every detail of each other's faces, knowing it might be years before they saw each other again. When the sun began to rise, William had to leave Ashworth Manor forever. Eliza stood at her bedroom window and watched his carriage disappear down the long tree-lined driveway. Her heart broke a little more with every turn of the wheels. She touched her damaged throat and tried to whisper his name. No sound came out at all, but somehow deep in her heart she knew that he heard her anyway. William went to the city of Edinburgh first. He had a good friend there named Thomas Sinclair, who was also a second son from a noble family. Thomas had decided to make his own way in the world instead of depending on his family's money. He had become a very successful merchant, buying and selling fine textiles and goods from other countries. "You look absolutely terrible," Thomas said when William appeared on his doorstep with just one small trunk. "What in the world happened to you?" William told him the entire story. He explained about Eliza, about the terrible accident that took her voice, about the choice he had made to give up everything for love. Thomas listened to the whole story without judging his friend at all. "What will you do now?" he asked kindly. "I honestly don't know," William admitted. "I need to find some kind of work. I need to build something that belongs to me." "I could use a business partner," Thomas said thoughtfully. "Someone with your education and social connections. Well, your former connections could be very valuable in my business, but it would mean starting at the very bottom. You'd have to learn everything from the beginning." "I'll do whatever it takes," William said with determination. And he really meant it. William threw himself into learning the textile business with the same intensity he had once brought to studying sign language. He learned about different kinds of fabrics and dyes, about shipping routes and foreign markets. He worked 16 hours a day and slept on a small cot in the back room of Thomas's shop. But every single evening, before he went to sleep, he practiced sign language. He bought more books about it. He learned new words and phrases. He wrote letters to the London School for the Deaf, asking for more advice and instruction. He was preparing for the day when he would see Eliza again. Meanwhile, back at Ashworth Manor, Eliza's life had become a careful balance between hope and sadness. Lady Catherine had ended up marrying someone else, a younger son from another noble family who had better financial prospects and fewer complications. The Duke had been angry about the broken engagement for many months, but eventually he accepted that his stubborn son was truly gone. "He'll come crawling back eventually," the Duke told anyone who would listen to him. "When he runs out of money and realizes what he's thrown away, he'll come back begging for my forgiveness." But Eliza knew better than that. William would never beg for anything. If he ever came back, it would be on his own terms as his own man. She had been promoted to head housemaid after Mrs. Hartwell retired. The new position came with better wages and her own small private room. She saved every penny she could, thinking that someday she might need money to start over somewhere completely new. She also continued learning and practicing sign language every day. She had conversations with herself using the mirror in her room. She taught other servants basic signs so they could communicate with her better. She even began teaching some of the local deaf children, visiting them on her days off from work. The Duke noticed her unusual activities but said nothing about them. Perhaps he felt guilty about his son's absence. Perhaps he simply didn't care what the servants did in their free time. 2 years passed slowly, then 3 years, then 5 long years. Eliza began to wonder if William was ever coming back at all. In his 6th year living in Edinburgh, William made a discovery that would change everything about his future. He was working late one night in the textile shop, carefully examining a shipment of beautiful silk that had come all the way from India. As he studied the patterns, he noticed something very unusual about one of the designs. The decorative symbols seemed to incorporate some kind of secret message, shapes that looked almost exactly like hand signs from sign language. Very curious about this discovery, William researched where the pattern had come from originally. He learned that it had been created by a deaf weaver in the city of Bombay who had developed an amazing way to incorporate sign language into his textile designs. Each pattern told a complete story that could only be understood by people who knew sign language. William was absolutely fascinated by this idea. He immediately wrote a letter to the weaver, asking for more information about this incredible technique. The letters that followed opened up an entirely new world for William. The weaver, whose name was Mr. Rajesh Gupta, had developed not just textile patterns, but also ways to create books and artwork that incorporated sign language. He had trained other deaf artisans in these techniques, creating a small but very successful community of artists who could communicate through their beautiful work. This could completely revolutionize communication for deaf people everywhere, William wrote excitedly to Thomas. Instead of being limited to face-to-face conversation, they could share stories and ideas through art, through textiles, through permanent visual media that everyone could enjoy. Thomas immediately saw the business potential in William's discovery. "You want to bring these techniques to Britain?" "More than that," William said with growing excitement. "I want to establish our own workshop here. I want to train British artisans in these methods. I want to create a whole new industry that bridges the gap between the hearing and deaf communities." It took 2 more years of incredibly hard work to make William's plan become reality. He had to learn all the techniques himself, which meant traveling all the way to India to study directly with Mr. Gupta. He had to find people willing to invest money in his idea. He had to find skilled artisans willing to learn new methods. He had to navigate complicated import regulations and guild restrictions that tried to prevent new businesses from starting. But eventually, Sinclair and Ashworth Fine Arts opened its doors in Edinburgh. The workshop specialized in textiles, books, and artwork that incorporated sign language communication in beautiful ways. The pieces were gorgeous enough to appeal to customers who couldn't understand sign language, but meaningful enough to create entirely new forms of expression for the deaf community. The business became successful almost immediately. Orders came from London, from Paris, from as far away as New York City. William found himself not just financially secure for the first time since leaving home, but actually quite wealthy. More importantly than the money, though, he had found his true purpose in life. He was creating something that built bridges between the hearing and deaf worlds. He was making communication possible in places where it had never existed before. 8 years after leaving Ashworth Manor with nothing but one small trunk, William was finally ready to go home. William arrived at Ashworth Manor on a beautiful spring morning that seemed designed for new beginnings. The apple trees were covered in pink and white blossoms, the air was soft and warm, and everything looked exactly as it had when he left it 8 years before. Well, almost everything looked the same. The Duke had aged considerably during those 8 years. His hair had turned completely grey, and he walked with a wooden cane now. When he saw William standing in the front entrance hall, he stopped walking and stared in complete shock. "William," he whispered, in disbelief. "Is that really you?" "Hello, Father," William said calmly. They stared at each other for what felt like a very long time. Then the Duke's careful composure began to crack. "You look successful," the Duke said very carefully, as if he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. William was dressed in fine clothes that were clearly expensive but not flashy or showy. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had built something valuable with his own hands and his own intelligence. "I am successful," William replied honestly. "I've built my own business from nothing. I've made my own fortune. I've found my place in the world without anyone's help." "And have you come back to claim your inheritance?" the Duke asked nervously. William shook his head firmly. "I've come back for something much more important than money or titles." The Duke's eyes became narrow and suspicious. "The servant girl, she's still here, you know. Still mute. Still unmarried. Still waiting for you, I suspect. Though I can't imagine why. Her name is Eliza," William said with quiet dignity. "And yes, I've come back for her. She's still beneath your station," the Duke said desperately. "Even more now than before. You're a successful businessman now. You could marry anyone you wanted. Why tie yourself to a woman who can't even speak? William looked at his father with something that might have been pity. Because she's the only person I've ever met who doesn't need words to understand everything that's truly important in life. He turned toward the servants' staircase. I'll be in the kitchen garden if you want to continue this conversation, Father. The Duke watched his son walk away and realized that the uncertain boy who had left 8 years ago had become a man he barely recognized and maybe barely deserved. In the kitchen garden, Eliza was picking fresh herbs for the evening meal, just as she had been doing on the day William left. She had grown even more beautiful over the years, if such a thing were possible. Her face had gained character and depth from years of grief and hope and patient waiting. Her hands had grown more graceful and expressive as sign language became her primary way of communicating with the world. She looked up when she heard familiar footsteps on the gravel path and saw William walking toward her through the afternoon sunshine. She dropped her herb basket, and fresh parsley and thyme scattered across the ground. William stopped exactly 3 feet away from her, the same distance he had kept that first day he had signed to her 8 years before. He slowly raised his hands and signed, "Hello, Eliza." She stared at him, taking in every single detail. He was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders from years of physical work. His hair was longer, and there were small lines around his eyes that spoke of years of hard work, determination, and success earned through his own efforts. But his hands still moved with the same careful precision when he signed to her. "I told you I would find a way for us," he signed clearly. Eliza's eyes filled with tears of joy and relief. She signed back, "You came back too. I promised I would always come back." She picked up her writing slate and charcoal from her herb basket and wrote quickly with shaking hands, "Your father, your inheritance, what did you do?" William read her worried words and signed with a proud smile, "I do not need his money anymore. I have earned my own fortune." Eliza wrote, "How is that possible?" William's smile grew even bigger as he signed, "I will show you everything." That evening, William showed Eliza the sample case he had brought with him from Edinburgh. Inside were the most beautiful textiles she had ever seen in her entire life, silks and cottons and wools decorated with patterns that seemed to dance and flow like living, breathing language. "These are stories," William signed as Eliza touched the fabrics with wonder. "Stories told in signs that everyone can see and appreciate." Eliza traced one of the intricate patterns with her finger. As she followed the flowing design, she began to recognize the shapes woven into the decorative motifs. They were sign language symbols, incorporated so seamlessly into beautiful artwork that most people would see only lovely decoration. But for someone who knew sign language, the textile told a complete, touching story. This particular piece told the story of a young woman who saved a drowning man and lost her voice in the process, and the man who spent years learning to speak with his hands so he could tell her that he loved her more than life itself. Eliza looked up at William with absolute wonder and amazement in her eyes. "This is our story," she signed with tears streaming down her face. "Yes," William signed back with his own eyes full of happy tears. "And I want to spend the rest of my life writing new stories with you by my side." Then he did something that took her completely by surprise. He knelt down on one knee right there in the herb garden, surrounded by the sweet scent of roses and lavender and all the herbs she had been gathering. Eliza Thornfield, he signed slowly and clearly, making sure every gesture was perfect. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Eliza looked down at this wonderful man kneeling before her. This man who had given up everything he had been born to for her love, and then had worked for 8 years to build it all back again with his own hands. This man who had learned an entire new language just so he could talk to her. This man who had found a way to turn their love story into beautiful art that could inspire other people. She knelt down beside him in the soft earth and signed, "Yes, with all my heart. Yes." Then she did something she hadn't even tried to do in 8 long years. She opened her mouth and whispered, so softly it was barely louder than a breath, "Yes, William, yes." The word was rough and broken, and barely recognizable as speech, but it was definitely there. William heard her whispered word and pulled her into his arms, tears of joy streaming down his face. "Your voice," he signed against her cheek. Eliza touched her throat in amazement and wonder. "I think it was always there," she whispered, and the words grew slightly stronger with each syllable. "I just needed something truly worth saying." They were married 3 months later in the little village church where Eliza had been baptized as a baby. The Duke attended the ceremony, though he never fully approved of the match, and probably never would. The entire household staff came to celebrate with them, along with half the people from the village and several of William's successful business associates who travelled all the way from Edinburgh. The wedding ceremony was conducted in both spoken English and sign language, the very first such wedding in the county's entire history. When the vicar asked William if he took Eliza to be his lawfully wedded wife, he answered both out loud and in signs, "I do with all my heart." When Eliza was asked the same question, she surprised everyone in the church by answering in her small, still healing voice, "I do forever and always." But then she added something in sign language that only William could understand. "Forever and always, and in every language we create together." William signed back with hands that were shaking with happiness. "In every story we tell for the rest of our..." The people in the church didn't understand the silent conversation flowing between the bride and groom's hands, but everyone could see and feel the love that moved between them like visible music. As they walked down the aisle together as husband and wife, Eliza began to hum very softly, just a small, imperfect sound, but it was the first music she had made in 8 long years. William heard her gentle humming and knew in his heart that he had kept his promise to her after all. She had never really stopped singing. She had just learned to sing in a completely different and more beautiful way, and they lived happily ever after, creating beautiful art together and helping other people learn that love can overcome any obstacle if you're willing to work hard enough and wait long enough and never ever give up hope.